Hello everyone, welcome here. You know, in my books I do write technical, it's true. And I always say to you that when I write about a certain weapon system, you can take for granted that I actually know what I'm talking about and that is factually correct. Now, there's a lot of you, of course, who would not really know about, especially the South African weapon systems, because it's not known to you. And therefore, we describe a lot of them inside the books, and we also describe other weapon systems which you should be aware of, which is used in other countries as well. And it's fascinating to me when I started the Legacy Conversations platform. I invited the pilots and the flight engineers and the experts and the officers and men and experts in their field, and they all came and talked to us. So if you have any type of interest in the military side of things, the spies are there as well, a few of them, not a lot. Get them to talk is But it's basically impossible unless we talk in a fictional way like the books are, many of them. So you can find really a lot of information from the people who's actually been there and done it. And so I thought there are quite a few videos where we speak about certain weapon systems like a C-160 Transall or the Rooivalk attack helicopter, which features a lot in the books, as well as, um, during the certain times in the border war of tanks, things like that. And so I decided to take the videos from the Legacy channel and put them here with a short introduction for you on the GMJ channel. So that when you read in a book about, say, flying with Dakota or the DC-3, even though that's a civilian way of speaking about it, C-47 Dakota is a better word. But it doesn't matter, we use them on both sides because people know what we're talking about. You can actually come here and you can look at the videos, you just need to search for them. A certain model you want to look at, a certain weapon system, a certain weapon system, and you'll find them, and that's it. I just want to stress here, and this is important, please do not link the pilots and the people who are speaking here in the video to the GMJ books. They've got nothing to do with the GMJ books. They don't feature in the GMJ books. They are not the pilots and the people we're talking about when we read the books. I don't even know about the books, right? So don't think that, oh wow, you're seeing this character here or that character there. No, no. You will never see them like that in a video. It's virtually impossible to do that. And so with that disclaimer, let's go to the video. And thank you once again for being here. I hope you enjoy the books. If you do, man, let me know. Let me know. I always appreciate speaking to readers. And if you wish, just leave a good review somewhere because we are under attack. It is so that the books are quite in your face sometimes, and sometimes the truth really annoys people, and then they come after you. But anyway, besides that, most of what you read in the GMJ books are actually based on facts. Most of them are training scenarios where it did happen, or it's one of those scenarios which you figured out which could have happened, but thank God didn't yet. So you work out how you're going to respond if this should happen. I think you call it contingency plans. And so that's how we put them into a book format so that we can get people to realize the danger because they're also educational, of course, and they're also there to warn. But a lot of people don't want to be warned. They want to live in their fool's paradise until it bites them. So anyway, that's it. God bless until we meet again.
Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello, everyone. Welcome here at Legacy. I must tell you, we have something interesting going on here. It's something which I found at the Tsong Museum there in Saxon World. And I've tried to get people to talk about this particular vehicle, but sadly they just couldn't do it. And it just so happens that I know something about that vehicle. It's a T55 main battle tank, and it's a monster of a machine. It's standing there. I write about it in two of my books, just in passing. I do like to add some forgotten military history or something interesting into the book so that, people cannot forget about it, because a lot of people will never know the story of this tank, which, as I said, it's a T55, and it's one of those which really a lot of tanks were made. In fact, they were made more than the T-34. About 1,000 more of them were made, and they made the Soviets now about 24,000 more of these tanks than what the Shermans of World War II was, as well as the M48. But even the M48 pattern was not even, it's just simply the tank which probably the most ever were made of. And if you think about it, at that stage, we're talking here in the 1960s, 70s, the Soviets had more than 50,000 of these tanks waiting there in Eastern Europe to strike into Western Europe, in other words, into NATO. I mean, at that stage, NATO still had a function. But anyway, the question is, how did we get hold of this tank? Now, that is fascinating. Because back in 1979, something strange happened. There was a French registered ship, freighter, and it went to Libya first, and it loaded 10 of these tanks, as well as a lot of ammunition and spare parts and things. So this freighter picked up these tanks, which at that stage were really advanced, all the latest modifications, and in fact, they called them the LD, Lima Delta tanks, T55, and they were from the Polish army at that stage, of course, as a major country in the Warsaw Pact. And so ended up in Libya, and then a war broke out between, I think, Tanzania and Uganda. Now, Idi Amin, you all remember him. He started a war on all Indians, and he started chasing them out of the country, and the war broke out between Tanzania and Idi Amin and Uganda. In fact, he lost it. He had to run away, and never got to the International Criminal Court for his criminal behavior or anything like that. But anyway, doesn't matter. So what happens is the ship came down all the way from Libya, probably from the Mediterranean, then all the way to the Atlantic, and then turned south, came down the coast of Africa, right around the Horn of Africa, and then all the way up to Tanzania. And then when it's close to there, the war was actually over, and so we got instructions to come back and drop these tanks in Angola. Now, in 1979, you guys know there were a bit of things going on in Angola as well, between the SADF and Angolans, and I believe the Cubans and whoever else was involved there. And here's where it's getting interesting, and this is what I'm not too sure about. If any one of you really know the answers, please come and tell us. You're welcome. But for some reason, this ship, I think it was called Aurora or something, it entered Durban Harbour to rebunker, to refuel, and to get water and diesel and things like that. And once it was in the harbour, of course, it's under South African jurisdiction, and the South African authorities simply confiscated the cargo. I don't know on which laws they did it. Probably there's some international laws involved here. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they grabbed these 10 tanks, and they also had, they say, about 150 tons of ammunition and things for it. And so South Africa ended up with these tanks. And so the question was, what will they do with it? In fact, I think they gave 8 of them to Rhodesia, who was still independent then. But remember, if you've seen the episode of Tony Ballinger, Rhodesia had 2 groups there, ZANU and ZIPRA. ZIPRA was more like conventional troops. They were thinking in terms of North Vietnam and Korea before it, coming with a massive conventional armor attack into Rhodesia, overrun it, and then carry on. While the ZANU people were more like the guerrillas, more like SWAPO, trying to infiltrate, create problems in the tribal lands, things like that. Totally opposite views of each other. Now, Rhodesia had no real answer to the T55s. They had the Eland cars, Eland 90s, which is a good armored vehicle, and we'll get someone to talk about them as well. I'm still looking for people. If you want to volunteer because you know something about them, please do so. But the 90mm gun on it is a low pressure gun. It's a French gun. It's not as powerful as it should be. But it was as powerful as it could be, if you understand what I meant. And the way these guys used it was fantastic. I mean, they shot out tanks, they shot out bunkers. They really did well with it. But that was due to training. It wasn't due to superior technology in any sense of a word, which is why when the Rhodesia came in, it was immediately changed. The gun changed. It became a 76mm from the Navy. I was told that they actually took the Otto Breda guns from the old strike craft and they put it in the turret of a first Rhodesia. And then it turned out to be a fantastically good cannon. But, it's been used by dozens of navies across the world. So we're not surprised by that. It's typical South African ingenuity. I'll get someone to talk about this as well. We did touch the subject with General Koos Liebenberg when he speaks about 6-3 MAF, because there was a squadron of Rhodesia actually attached to 6-3 MAF. That's why he mentioned it. So we gave 8 of these T55 tanks, the LD models, to Rhodesia. They created something, I believe it was called Echo Squadron or something like that, or the Armor Corps. And then they got clever. They would move those tanks around. And then people would see them here and see them there and see them here. And after a while, Zipra and these people were thinking there were many, many hundreds of these tanks in Rhodesia instead of 8. And yeah, the rest is history. And you know what? Something similar happened in our war in Angola. Yeah, in 89, around about 88, 89, when the Cuban 50th Division was thinking of coming south. And there was like a Maskarovka took place. The South Africans spread the word that they had regiments of G5s there. They started calling up 400,000 people or threatened to do it, soldiers. I spoke to General Bowman of Special Forces, and he said to me, yeah, if they called up 400 people, 400,000, they would have been able to equip and maintain them logistically, which is a fantastic effort if you think about it. And also, of course, they started doing what the Jews did in 73 with Yom Kippur, where they made it known that they are starting to assembling the nuclear weapons. Of course, they deny to this very day they actually have. But in fact, they do have it. So we know that. And I write about that in other books as well. But the point I'm trying to make is the South Africans then said, well, they've got nuclear weapons and they're assembling them. You come down that border and see what happens to you. But in fact, as we know, the Cubans never came over, but we had plans really to fall back all the way, I think, almost to Windhoek. Would we have used nuclear weapons, guys? I don't know. I doubt it. I think it was more a threat than anything else. But if you have expert knowledge about this, please come and talk to us. I'm just bringing the strings to you together, which is very typical of how I write books as well. You grab something here, grab something there, and you put it together so that you can see there's a pattern forming, which is very, very interesting to me anyway. So the Rhodesians had their 8 T55s. I believe, and I speak on a correction, but I read in a few books, it didn't go well with them. Their first commander was an American officer and a good man, but he had his own ideas. I think one of the tanks with him sitting on top of it actually made it on the Soldier of Fortune magazine cover. I don't have any photos of that, but that's what I was told. But at some stage, the South African armor people had to go over and show them how this thing works and how to use it in combat and so forth. That is very fascinating too, and I'm working on someone to come and tell us about it, but up to now I couldn't. So anyway, now there were 2 tanks left out of the original 10, which we confiscated. in Durban Harbour. But that's a story by itself, because I've spoken to some French intelligence officers of that era, not on legacy, but in a previous life. And they all said to me that ship did not enter the harbour by itself. They were wangling it. There were some things going in the background. But again, I don't have any knowledge about it. But if that was an operation, to get hold of these weapons, and they did fantastically well. But anyway, we know we grabbed the tanks, and then one was tested to destruction. In other words, they took it apart. They started shooting at it. They did all the tests to find out where's the weak spots, because it's a magnificent tank. I think it's got a 100 millimeter rifle gun, which is good. It had a laser rangefinder way on the turret to the left side. And in this particular one, it's not there anymore. It has like a searchlight, and that's the 1960s. Interesting thing, if you look at these Eastern Bloc tanks, is the wheels, the rispers, extremely broad things. They are made to go over mud and snow, which we've seen in Ukraine now with American and British tanks. They just can't make it there. They're not good enough. They're too heavy. They just sink into the mud, become stationary targets. Then anything which is stationary is dead in war. You know that. You know that better than me. So anyway, one of these tanks were then left in South Africa anyway. What happened to the remaining 8 tanks in the Rhodesian army, which became the Zimbabwean army, I don't know. In one of my books, I think, Code Name Green 41, I mention it that it's in Mozambique, but that's fictional. I've heard rumors that at one stage 2 of these tanks were found across the border into Mozambique, and they were shot out. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it's in the book anyway. And the Green 41 is an interesting book, because we asked the question, and this actually happened because it was tried in Vietnam against the Americans and the Allied forces. Is it possible to drug up an army? In other words, to smuggle so many drugs and things into an army that, they can't operate because they're stoned out of their minds. And if they do operate, they just screw up. You get these killer types, they go into overdrive, they smoke their dacha, and they just cause havoc, which is the best way to win an insurgency. If you can get the official forces to commit crimes, then of course the population becomes sympathetic to you, or at the very least they become neutral during the war. And neutrality is the last thing you can afford, because that means a guy will not actually warn you that there's something happening. It's just the same in Rhodesia. At one stage, the Salute Scouts were walking around, and much to the shock of the people in special branch and military intelligence, is no one reported it. And that's when you know you've lost. That's when you know that the terrorists are moving freely amongst the population, like Mao said, like a fish in the water. Once you've gone that far, you can just as well go home. So in Code Name Green 41, we look at is it possible to interdict these drug lines towards South Africa? Is it possible to destabilize a country or an army with drugs if you can give it out freely, get the guys to use it? We come to conclusions in that book. I'm sure you will like to find out what the conclusions were. And also what is fascinating there is, I know, and I'm not revealing any details, but I do know similar operations that take place with special forces at a later stage, where some of these lines, logistic lines, were interdicted. And then also, since we're talking about captured enemy equipment, it's a horrible thing which happened in Iraq before the Americans ran away, is that at one stage where the enemy, the Taliban, was very equipped in the Afghan army, simply because of corruption. They would, the guy would cross over, he would go and hand his rifle over, his night vision, everything, and hand over all these things. And in one particular incident, it is in code name VET 101, where an entire platoon of Afghan people were killed because they didn't have night vision. The Taliban had night vision, and they simply just shot them dead one by one. It's astonishing that the platoon didn't break and run. They just laid there and got killed, basically murdered. And then everybody, of course, in the US, these new con idiots, they jumped on the bandwagon and they started saying, no, Russia supplied these weapons. Russia supplied this. It's bullshit. This is American equipment which was either captured or taken from the bodies of dead soldiers who were issued these weapons. And it's a major bloody story. If you can get hold of the other side's technology, you can defeat it. I mean, obviously, if you know what is the strengths and the bad spots of weaknesses of such a thing, then of course you can defeat it. And that is why there's always standing orders out there. You don't let your enemy capture your equipment. You blow it up. You use your explosives or whatever you have with you to make sure that they cannot use that equipment against you. But even Detroit, you can still learn a lot about it. It's fascinating, these things, guys, because during the Battle of Britain, it was quite easy to get the German pilots to speak, the captured ones, simply because they believed they're going to win. And they also were arrogant. And so they one said to the British scientists, they said to them, well, you can look for our identification friend or foe, our transponders and things in the aircraft, you'll never find it. And of course, they looked and they did find it. And because of that, they could start bending with oboe and these things, bending the lines, which these people were flying on to bomb targets. They could just bend it slightly. And they could also identify technically what was happening. And therefore, they won. This is crucial, and Codename Vet 101, it's the book's exactly about that, where you go and capture something from the enemy, and then the damn problem is to get that thing out. Because, well, if you do that with the army, it's not that hard. I mean, you've done it yourself, I'm sure many of you listening here, and if you did, come and talk to me, please come and tell us about it. But if with Protea or these ops, you go in, you capture the enemy equipment, you drive it back, you move with that enemy group, equipment, vehicles, guns, whatever you have, tanks, you move back into South Africa and it's easy. But when you're in the espionage world, you have to smuggle a damn tank out somewhere. It's not that easy, man. You have to either fly it out or ship it out, or drive it over the border into a friendly country, and from there on, do something with it. Or sometimes, of course, you need to, like in Codename on Button, you need to know what's happening with the enemy equipment, but there's no way that you actually want them to know you know. So it's an entire story how to infiltrate this, plant whatever you want to plant, or do whatever you need to do there, and then just move back, and nobody's wiser but you in the background is now able to turn that drone ship, which was what it was about, turning it around. Did that happen? Yes, I've heard about stories about that. Once again, American failure of intelligence, but they of course don't believe these things. So whatever. So that's the story. But the remaining one out of the 10, you'll remember 8 of them went to Rhodesia to Echo Troop or whatever they called themselves. A squadron, probably squadron, Echo Squadron. And one of the ninth one was shot to pieces and don't exist anymore. And the 10th one, the last remaining one of this story, which started in 1979, is standing there at the Seoul Military Museum in Saxonwold. That is the one which I showed you the pictures about. If you walk around it, you'll see they have a very short description of exactly what I told you now, but not what, of course, I wrote in my books. Further, they just felt they got it from the ship called Astora. I believe that's what it was called. It was being tested, and here it is. And when they got that tank in 1991, the museum, it was in a perfect running condition. Is it today? I don't know. Look, it's not a museum where you're trying to have things in running order. It's more like a static display. And we're really grateful. And lastly, if you watch the video closely, when I walk around the tank at the back, you'll see the camera making like that. That was me falling down. because I was recording, and I didn't see a little water sloot or thing there, and I just fell. And we had a great amount of fun at that museum. So, guys, if you're close to Saxon World, please go and support these guys. It's worth the 50 rands, whatever you pay. And you can go and have a picnic there. It is fascinating. It's fantastic. Remember, there's a lot of videos coming out from there. You've seen the one of Alouette probably already with Nellis and myself standing there talking about it. There's also one of the C47 standing there, which is coming out, if not out already, which is fantastic viewing. It is really something to see. 3-2 battalions displays there. We broadcasted already the 1061 MAF, and there's going to be more because I've got videos for the G5, the G6, and we're getting the right officers to tell us about them. And then we also have a T54 and others. So all in all, really worth your while to go and visit. I'm sorry I couldn't get an army officer for you to tell about the story of a T55, but I hope this was interesting to you. So God bless until we meet again.
The Ditsong National Museum of Military History was established during the Second World War, largely as a result of the fact that South Africa had made no attempt during the First World War to record its activities in that war. So fortunately, when General Smuts became Prime Minister in 1939 and South Africa declared war, he made sure that our involvement in the Second World War would be recorded for posterity and for future generations. The result of that was the start of what was then known as the South African National War Museum. The museum was opened on these premises in August 1947, and at the time of the opening, Smuts said that the museum would serve as a memorial to what was then known as the greatest united effort our country had produced, which was the involvement in the Second World War. He also said that the museum would serve as a warning for future generations that the weapons that they see here must never be used again. Unfortunately, as we all know, that warning has not been heeded. In the early 1970s, the museum became known as the South African National Museum of Military History, and the scope was shifted to the preservation and recording of the entire history of South Africa. So not just the First and Second World Wars, but all wars, all conflicts where South Africans had been involved. In the late 1990s, under the new dispensation, all the national museums were amalgamated, and the 3 national museums in the Gauteng province, this museum and the National Cultural History Museum and the Transvaal Museum, were amalgamated together to form what was then became known as Ditsong Museums of South Africa. And this museum has from then been known as the Ditsong National Museum of Military History, and that is our official name today. We preserve, as has been said, all aspects of South Africa's military history, and the exhibits that you see here at the museum are not here to glorify war. The exhibits are here to show what can be done if necessary, and show that war is a sad thing. People die in warfare. We like to educate people that war is not a good thing at all. But we do acknowledge that people went and served their country. In many cases, they volunteered to do this, and many people paid the supreme sacrifice for their country. And we acknowledge that as well. And as such, the museum is also, we consider it home to all military veterans who have served their country. And many veterans associations, such as the Moths, the Memorable Order of Tin Hats, the South African Legion of Military Veterans, and other associations such as the Gunners Association, the SAF Association, and the South African Armour Association also hold their respective commemorations here at the museum as well. The museum is open 7 days a week. The only 2 days that the museum is not open is Good Friday and Christmas Day. Our opening times are from 9 till 4:30 every day, Monday to Sunday. The entrance fee is 50 Rand, subject to change. That's the minimum fee. There are other fees for scholars and for senior citizens. The facilities that we offer here at the museum is basically for everybody, not just for military enthusiasts. We do have a conference center here. We do allow for events to take place, such as conferences, meetings, events. You could have cocktail parties here. We've had many in the past. We also welcome children's birthday parties. They seem to be very popular here. And people are welcome to come with a picnic basket and sit on the lawn and, just take in the atmosphere, the garden, the tranquil surrounds that we have here at the museum. One of our facilities we have here is free parking. We do not charge for parking. The parking is secure as well. We do have full-time security plus security cameras. The museum falls under Ditsong Museums of South Africa has been spoken about. The Ditsong then falls under the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. Being a government department, funding is not entirely adequate. We do need further donations and support. We do have a building and development trust run by veterans and people who support the museum, and they raise funds to assist various programs that the museum has. We are always looking for volunteers in this regard. Every quarter we have what we call maintenance days at the museum, where people come and help clean the exhibits and do maintenance around the museum. That seems to be very popular with the crowd. We also require support with certain technological aspects, such as maintenance of exhibits. There are times where we don't have the technical capacity to carry out such maintenance. So voluntary support is always welcome here at the museum. We rely as well on donations. They can either be monetary, which would go towards the upkeep of this museum, as well as exhibits. And we look at exhibits that maybe have someone that was very important, medals or uniforms or what have you, or even other things such as badges, photographs, even documentation such as diaries, letters that go into our archives. We do have a library here, one of the most substantial military history libraries in the Southern Hemisphere. It is open during weekdays, during opening hours here at the museum. People are welcome to visit the library or make an appointment to do research in our library as well. As the director of this fine establishment, we welcome everybody here to this museum. I look forward to seeing more and more people coming to learn about our military history and using our facilities. People are always very welcome here.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.